YNW Melly back in court today. His attorney saying the state has not given enough evidence to this point to keep him in jail, but prosecutors say they have proven plenty that shows he needs to remain behind.
YNW Melly just caught a heavy win in the appellate court, and this move shook the whole legal world watching his case. The 4th District Court of Appeal officially backed Judge Murphy's earlier decision to shut down huge chunks of warrant evidence, and that single ruling explains why this entire trial has been dragging through delay after delay in the first place. Judge Murphy had already trimmed the time range investigators were allowed to pull from Melly's Snapchat, Gmail, Facebook, Instagram, and iCloud accounts, and that move had prosecutors stressing hard. They wanted full access to everything, but the judge slammed the brakes and said they were going way too far with it. Now the higher court stepped in and agreed with him completely, turning this situation into a major turning point in the case. To put it simple, Judge Murphy basically said those warrants were built like a fishing net instead of a focused search. They were trying to grab every single thing from Melly's accounts from the very beginning all the way to the end, like digging through his entire digital life, instead of zeroing in on the time of the murders. Because of that, he restricted investigators to only a tight time window tied directly to the actual incident, not years of private messages that had nothing to do with anything. When the state appealed, they didn't even try to argue that the warrants were fair, which already tells you a lot. Instead, they claimed we would have found this stuff anyway, trying to push the angle that the evidence would have shown up through another route. But Melly's team fired right back and pointed out that Florida law doesn't allow you to use evidence from a warrant that's overly broad, even if you believe you could have found it using some other method. This new ruling is huge because it shows the appellate court isn't letting prosecutors stretch the rules or pull in evidence that doesn't meet the legal standard. And if this is the tone the court is setting now, the rest of this case might look way different than what the state originally expected. So Melly's legal team went full throttle, trying to wipe out every single piece of evidence tied to those warrants, hoping the judge would trash the whole thing in one swing. They argued the searches were so wide and messy that none of it should even make it near a courtroom. But the appellate court was in team moved it all and basically said Judge Murphy handled it the right way from the jump. The court doubled down by saying the state's so-called key witness claims were nothing but speculation, and that word hit the record like a hammer. They flat out said the state didn't have real proof to support what they were pushing, which instantly weakened their entire argument. Still, the judges made sure to explain why they didn't accept Melly's side, asking for everything to be thrown out, even if parts were flawed. Melly's lawyers claimed that if any part of a warrant was invalid, then the whole warrant should collapse like a house with no foundation. But the court shut that down quickly and made it clear that this isn't how the law works at all. It explained that a warrant doesn't magically become useless just because some sections were written too wide or too loose. Florida courts and even federal courts have already said that judges can cut out the bad sections while keeping the parts that actually follow the law, which is exactly what happened here. In simple terms, the court can slice away the unfair pieces and keep whatever remains legally solid. Judge Murphy even pointed out that he had to lean on federal rulings for guidance because Florida didn't offer much detail about how to properly break down a warrant, so he used a federal step-by-step process, trimming the search to only what was necessary, legal, and tied directly to the case, not the extra stuff investigators tried to sweep in. The appellate court also reminded everyone that separating a warrant is never easy, especially when some pieces don't even meet the basic standard of probable cause. At the end of the day, the judges stood firm behind Judge Murphy and kept Melly's win locked in place just like his team wanted. They doubled down on the idea that a warrant can be narrowed or even sliced apart if the only real problem is that it stretches across too big of a time frame. In simple terms, if police don't set a clear time limit, the court can cut out the unnecessary stretch and keep the sections that actually follow the law. And that's exactly the play Judge Murphy made. He went straight to federal case law, especially a Second Circuit case known as Galpin, to guide his decision and trim the warrants down the right way. That Galpin ruling basically teaches judges how to make a warrant fair without tossing every piece of evidence in the trash. And the appellate court said Murphy used that same blueprint perfectly. The Galpin case gets used so much because it lays out a clean balance. Keep the parts of a warrant that are specific and legally tight. But if a warrant is so overloaded and poorly defined that you can't save any section, then yeah, the whole thing collapses. But if there are valid pieces inside it, the court can pull those out and leave the rest behind. In Melly's situation, the trial court followed the Galpin method step by step, checking each warrant individually instead of giving one blanket decision. One of the biggest examples was the iCloud account tied to Melly's iPhone X, where the judge realized investigators had gone way past what was reasonable. That original search tried to sweep in far too much personal data, so Murphy sliced it down and limited it strictly to the narrow window around the incident itself. In simple terms, this federal approach gave Judge Murphy a clean legal roadmap to follow, and the higher court fully backed the way he used it. The affidavit that supported the original warrant was supposed to show YNW Melly's location around the moment everything happened. And that tiny detail ended up becoming a major turning point in the whole argument. The real issue was that neither the affidavit nor the warrant had any kind of time limit written into it, which meant investigators were handed access to Melly's entire iCloud account from day one to the very end. That's everything, years of private data opened up with no boundaries, which is wild for any case. Judge Murphy looked at that and immediately stopped it, saying it was way too broad for what the investigators actually needed, so he cut it down hard. He limited the warrant to the exact window tied to the shooting, just the moments when it happened, plus a few hours on each side. He explained that the true purpose of the warrant was simple: find out where Melly was during and right after the incident. Now, dig through years of unrelated personal info that had nothing to do with the timeline. The judge also noted that investigators had real reasons to believe the people in the car were using their phones while everything was going down. It had even been mentioned before that Melly called his mother shortly afterward, something brought up in earlier reports. The phone's data showed it connected to nearby cell towers around that time, proving the phone was active during those critical moments. But even with that, investigators couldn't pinpoint exactly which apps were used or what messages were sent. The tower data only proved the phone was alive, not the exact actions happening on it. The trial court locked in on the exact hours surrounding the incident and pulled out 5 specific categories of evidence that could be reviewed, cutting everything else out with precision. Judge Murphy made sure the focus stayed strictly on what mattered: tracking Melly's movements in that crucial time frame and protecting his digital privacy from being turned inside out for no real reason. Those warrants were originally designed to connect Melly to the crimes, but this is where the story gets real interesting. The appellate court said the smartest way to handle digital warrants, especially massive cloud accounts, is to make them time-based, not full account takeovers. That means narrowing the search to a tight window, not dragging in years of personal info that has nothing to do with the case. This whole logic came from a 2023 case called United States v. McGall, and it became a guide for how to clean up these digital searches. After reviewing everything, the judges agreed that Murphy didn't mess up. He handled it exactly how the law expects, and they officially affirmed his decision. That means Melly's win stays locked in, and it also explains why this trial has been crawling forward instead of moving fast. The state hated this ruling from the beginning and filed an appeal, hoping the higher court would let them use every piece of digital evidence they pulled. But let us be honest, even they had to know this was a long shot from the start. A lot of people believe the appeal was just a move to stall, especially after the original prosecutor was taken off the case. Now the truth is finally out. This appeal dragged the case almost 2 whole years, and it just got denied for good. The court made it crystal clear that Murphy was right to limit what investigators could use. And that means certain digital evidence is officially off the table. It's a major shift heading into the next trial. And now that the appeal is dead, the pace of this case is about to pick up fast. In this situation, the prosecution can't lean on that huge stack of digital evidence anymore. So now they were forced to rebuild their entire argument using only the tiny window the court approved. That puts serious pressure on the state because their timeline just shrank, and a lot of what they thought would help them is officially off limits now. Meanwhile, Melly's defense team is celebrating hard, because this is exactly what they've been yelling since day one, that these warrants were overly invasive and dipped way too deep into his private world. Now the higher court basically confirmed their point, giving the defense a stronger base to stand on moving into the next phase, and trust they're going to highlight this in front of the jury. This wasn't some light victory, it was a major shift in the whole case. But don't get it confused, because this doesn't mean Melly is automatically walking free yet. The state still has pieces of evidence that survived the cut, and they're going to squeeze every drop out of whatever the court allowed. What makes the whole situation even heavier is how much the first trial already revealed witness statements, messages, and contradictions that left the first jury unable to agree. So now every new hearing carries extra weight. The next move for the state is to regroup and start preparing for a retrial. But this time, they're stepping into the courtroom with fewer tools than before, and that changes the whole dynamic. Melly's team is already gearing up to argue that the prosecution's case got weak, way weaker after this ruling, and they're confident the jury will see that difference. Reports say Judge Murphy is ready to push this case forward fast. And with the appeal finally out of the way, nothing's holding this trial back anymore. Remember, this appeal froze the entire case for almost 2 full years, leaving everything stuck in place while the tension kept building. That's 2 years of waiting, 2 years of speculation, and 2 years of people analyzing every single move, like detectives online. Now everyone is asking the same question: when is the new trial date going to drop? It's clear this ruling didn't just nudge the case forward, it completely flipped the strategy on both sides. The defense is already gearing up to focus on what's missing, all that digital data that got thrown out forever. They're going to argue that the state can fully prove anything without that massive chunk of info, especially now that investigators don't have years of Melly's digital trail to lean on. Without full access to his accounts, proving movement patterns, communication timelines, or detailed behavior gets way harder for prosecutors. The state, meanwhile, is likely to lean heavily on witness testimony. Whatever forensic evidence they still have, and the limited phone data that survived the cuts. But they rebalancing on a thin wire because any weak claim or shaky detail could get challenged instantly now that the defense has more leverage. And while all this legal pressure builds up, Melly supporters online are going wild, some saying he's coming home soon, while others think the state is about to swing harder than ever. One thing is guaranteed though, this ruling flipped the energy inside that courtroom. Ever since the first trial crashed into a mistrial, the tension behind the scenes has been heavy, with both sides scrambling to get ready for the next round. Prosecutors even switched up their whole squad, bringing in new faces, hoping for a cleaner approach this time around. But that switch might end up hurting them because the new team wasn't involved in the original investigation. Now they've got less evidence to stand on than the first crew did. Meanwhile, Melly's lawyers look more confident than ever. They've been waiting on this ruling because they knew it had the power to swing the momentum in their direction. They've been saying from day one that this case has been dragged out unfairly, and this long appeal delay only strengthens their argument. Their next move will almost definitely be pushing hard for a faster trial date, because Melly has been sitting in this limbo way too long, and his team knows the delay has been heavy. Fans on social media are digging into every update like detectives, and once this appellate decision dropped, timelines lit up instantly. Some people are calling this the real turning point, saying this might finally put Melly in a position the state didn't want him to have. Others are staying cautious, warning that the state always finds a new angle to fight back, so nothing is guaranteed yet. Either way, this legal chess match isn't over, but the board changed dramatically. Both sides now have to adjust their next moves. The conversation around this case has never been quiet, and every legal twist seems to split the internet all over again. Supporters argue the court's ruling proves the system pushed too far from the beginning, saying investigators were dipping into areas they had no business touching. Critics, on the other hand, claim this decision could make it harder to get justice for the victims, which is why the public is so split. Legal analysts are pointing out that this appellate decision shows digital privacy is turning into one of the biggest battles in modern criminal cases, especially when cloud data and social media accounts are involved. Prosecutors want everything they can get online. But judges are finally drawing real lines, saying no, you can't just take everything, and that's a major shift in today's courtroom. This ruling might even influence how other courts handle digital evidence going forward because the message is clear. You can overreach just because the data exists. For now, Melly's team is focused on rebuilding their defense narrative, arguing he's been wrongfully targeted and that investigators went too far when they reached into his private accounts. Whether you believe his story or not, it's clear this trial is bigger than just one rapper. It has a fight over how far the state is allowed to go in the digital age. So here's where everything stands today. YNW Melly just secured one of the biggest legal victories of his entire case as the appeals court backed Judge Murphy completely and shut down the evidence the state wanted to keep. With the scope now locked into a tight window, the state's entire plan to unload massive amounts of digital data just fell apart in one clean hit. But this isn't the finish line. This is the setup for what could turn into one of the most heated retrials hip-hop has ever seen. The prosecution has to rebuild from scratch. The defense is walking in with momentum, and fans everywhere are waiting to see how each move unfolds. From here on out, every hearing is going to matter, every witness, every document, every detail that makes it into the courtroom. Even the smallest piece of information could tip the whole case in one direction or the other, and everyone watching knows this moment just shifted everything. The legal fight isn't over, not even close. But in this chapter, Melly definitely walked away with the upper hand. Back in the first trial, State presented a stack of messages pulled from Melly's old emails and social accounts, including conversations with people they claimed were tied to certain groups. But after this new ruling, none of that can come back. Those emails and chats sent weeks before or weeks after the incident are officially shut out of the retrial. That also means a ton of messages from Instagram, Snapchat, and Facebook with random people aren't coming in either, because the court ruled those conversations stretched way beyond the time frame that actually mattered to the case. They're gone for good now, trimmed out of the courtroom just like the judge intended. However, the prosecution still has a handful of key pieces left to work with, and they were going to hold on to those like gold as they try to rebuild their argument for this next round. Some pieces of the state's case still survived, like the phone tracking data, the ballistics report, and the blood pattern analysis from inside the car. Investigators focused on they've been claiming that the blood layout showed someone was sitting in a certain seat during the shooting based on the spots where blood didn't land, and that specific detail is still allowed to come up in court. But even with that, this moment is still a huge win for Melly's defense team. The amount of evidence the state can now use has been cut down in a major way, and that makes their road forward way tougher. From here, the whole question becomes whether the pieces they still have are enough to prove anything beyond a reasonable doubt. Because that's the only thing that matters when the jury walks in. This case just changed again, and changed big, right in front of everyone watching. Going forward, all eyes are locked on the courtroom to see what survives, what gets challenged, and how both sides adjust their entire strategy. The tension is rising, the clock is ticking, and this situation is heading into one of the most unpredictable retrials hip-hop has seen in years. So here's where we stand. YNW Melly just got one of his most important wins yet. The appellate court backed Judge Murphy, and the state now has a thinner case than ever before. Whether you believe he's coming home, or believe the state still has a shot, one thing's clear: this story is nowhere near finished, and the next round is about to shake the whole courtroom again.